Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I want to share with you 10 true Halloween night shift stories, each one unfolding behind locked doors, flickering security monitors, and long, quiet hours when no one was supposed to be watching. Out there, some jobs don't stop for Halloween, and when you're the only one on duty, sometimes you're the only one who notices that something isn't right. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and let me know where you're listening from, because one of these stories might have started just down your street. Thank you for being here. Now then, let's begin. I should have called off that night, but who says no to double pay on a holiday, right? That was the excuse I gave myself while slipping my badge on and locking up the little duplex I rented just off Route 20. It was Halloween, but for me, it was just another shift at Lake Ridge Auto Lot. My name's Megan Collins. I was 23 then, fresh out of community college and working nights to pay off my mom's hospital bills. She'd fallen ill fast the winter before, and every bit of overtime counted. Ashtabula was the kind of town where folks either grew up and stayed or passed through on their way to Erie. I grew up here. I stayed. The cold hit different near Lake Erie in October. There was this dampness in the fog that felt like it crawled inside your clothes and stayed there. That night it rolled in thicker than usual, coating the lot in a blur of orange streetlights and silhouettes. The office windows fogged over from the inside, even with the space heater humming. I remember putting on the little black cat mask I'd bought from the gas station, thinking it might lighten the mood. My boyfriend Eli promised to swing by after his shift ended at the warehouse next door. We were supposed to hit a friend's Halloween party together around midnight. I left the mask perched on the desk lamp and turned the radio up. Static. Then a raspy, old Halloween jingle about witches and skeletons played, like it was being pulled from some forgotten cassette. Trick-or-treaters were still out when I arrived around 7, but by 10, the streets had gone quiet. Just the sound of dry leaves tumbling across pavement and the occasional bark from a yard dog. That's when the security alarm chirped. It wasn't loud, just a single beep, the kind it makes when a car door opens after hours. I checked the screen. No motion detected. I stepped outside, scanning the rows of used cars lined up like sleepy beasts, each dusted with lake fog. Nothing moved. Then I noticed something off. A black Toyota Camry sat 2 spaces over from where it had been earlier. At first I thought I was remembering wrong. I'd personally moved that car to the back row last week after it sold. Papers signed. Keys turned in. No plates. Gone. I walked over. The windows were misted over and the doors were locked. No footprints around it. I pulled out the key fob for that car, just to check. Still in the drawer where it should be. I pressed the lock button anyway. No response. Back inside. The office phone rang. Not my cell. Not the business line either. The inner line. The one that rarely rang unless it was a vendor or the owner. I picked up. Lake Ridge Auto. Megan speaking. There was only breathing, heavy and wet, like someone struggling to inhale through a mask. I held the phone there, waiting. Hello? The line went dead. I hung up and stood still for a second. Listening, the radio crackled again and shifted into another tune, something slow and creaky like a music box. I turned to look out the front window. The Camry had moved again. It was parked directly in the center aisle now, pointed toward the front office. Headlights off. Engine quiet. Still no plates. I stepped out the door slowly. The motion sensor lights flicked on, casting a sharp white glow over the lot. The fog thickened in their beams, swirling in place like it had nowhere to go. I kept the key fob in my hand, thumb on the panic button. The Camry sat still. Closer now. Too close. I aimed the fob and pressed lock again. Nothing. Then I let my arm drop, just for a second, and the headlights blinked 3 times. I froze. Someone knocked from the inside. Not tapped. Knocked. Like they were trying to break the glass from the inside out. I backed up fast, nearly slipping on the wet concrete. My breath caught in my throat as I sprinted for the door, slamming it shut behind me and twisting the deadbolt. I stood behind the glass, staring out at the fogged lot. My heart hadn't slowed down yet. The phone sat silent. The radio hissed low. And outside, the Camry's shadow blurred in the mist. I tried calling Eli. No answer. His shift should have ended by now. I switched the monitor view to the lot cameras. The feed flickered but showed the car still in the middle of the lane. Lights off. No movement anywhere. It looked like the fog itself had taken shape around it. I swallowed hard, grabbed the keys to one of the newer SUVs, and told myself I was leaving. When I stepped outside again, everything was still. The air felt heavier, quieter. I clicked the SUV key. Nothing. The locks didn't move. I tried again, but the dashboard lights stayed dead. That was when the alarm chime echoed from inside the vehicle. A mechanical voice said, "Front door open," even though I was holding the key in my hand. I took a step back toward the office. Every motion light flicked on at once, flooding the lot with a cold white glare. I could see my breath turning to mist as it hit the air. I pulled the utility knife from my pocket, more for comfort than anything, and waited. Then everything stopped. The lights, the sound, even the air. It felt like the world had taken a long breath and decided not to let it go. I heard the heater in the office sputter back to life. The power had returned. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. It was Eli. His voice came through calm, confused. "Hey, where are you? I've been waiting by the gate for 15 minutes. Did you lock yourself out or something?" Oh. I pressed the phone to my ear and stared toward the gate. Nothing but fog and the faint glint of taillights. "Eli, you said you're at the gate. With cast about the P's of US Valley." "Yeah," he said. "I saw your key fob lying near the middle of the lot. Thought you dropped it." 9024. Teletation. I looked down at my hand. The fob was still there, its tiny red light blinking once, as if to confirm it. The radio cut out. The office lights dimmed again. Then the Camry's headlights burst on with a blinding flash that sliced through the fog. The engine roared to life, the kind of sound that feels too deep to come from a car. My body moved before my thoughts did. I ran. The pavement gleamed slick beneath my shoes. I could feel the heat of the headlights against my back as I sprinted for the SUV. The door handle was cold, slick with condensation. My hand shook as I yanked it open. A shape moved in the glare behind me. Tall, narrow, faceless. It stepped out from the Camry's windshield, as if the glass had been a doorway. He is close now. I can feel the air shift as he moves. The next second, he grabs the back of my jacket and jerks me backward. My shoulder slams against the SUV. Pain bursts down my arm. I twist around and thrust the key fob at him, slashing it across his hand. He lets go, a low rasp breaking from his throat, and steps back into the fog until he vanishes. I stumble into the SUV and slam the door shut. My fingers grope for the ignition. There is no wheel. The steering column ends in a frayed stump of wires. The seat is soaked. The air reeks of damp leather and metal. I shove the door open again and run for the gate. My legs barely move right. The fog swirls in thick ribbons around me. "Eli," I scream. My voice cracks in the cold air. I see the faint beam of his phone light ahead. "Megan," he yells. "Where are you? I don't see you." That's a with take moment. I wave my arm, but the fog folds between us like a curtain. Then everything goes quiet again. No headlights. No sound. Just my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. When the police came later, they said a neighbor called after seeing the lights flash in the lot. No sign of a break-in. No footprints. They even checked the Camry. It was locked, spotless, and completely dead. The battery was gone. A week later, I was folding laundry when I felt something hard in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. It was the Camry's key fob. I never took it that night. My name is Jenna. I was 25 when this happened, working the overnight shift at a 24-hour diner in Millburn, Pennsylvania. The place sat just off the old highway, next to an abandoned train tunnel that used to carry freight down through the Alleghenies. Millburn was one of those towns that never fully woke up, no matter the season. Fog clung to everything like dust on forgotten furniture. I worked nights because the rent on my apartment had gone up and I couldn't afford to argue. That was it. No deep backstory. My friends were all downtown that Halloween, drinking, dancing, dressed like witches or vampires or whatever. I was brewing burnt coffee, microwaving meatloaf, and trying not to fall asleep during the slow hours. The fog outside was thicker than usual. It smeared across the diner windows like someone had painted it on from the outside. Even the red neon sign barely pushed through. The radio behind the counter was low, playing old songs stitched with static. I remember thinking the place felt more like a waiting room than a diner that night. A little after 9, someone came in. He wore a black hoodie pulled tight over his head, and he kept the strings drawn so low I couldn't see his face. He didn't say a word, just walked past the counter and sat in the farthest booth, the one by the window that faced the parking lot. I asked if he needed a menu, but he didn't answer. I went back to wiping down the coffee machines, but something felt off. Every time I glanced up, I swear he was staring right at me. Yet each time I met his eyes, he would turn just slightly, like he'd been looking somewhere else the whole time. It started to wear on me. That feeling, like being watched through glass. 15 minutes passed, maybe 20. Then he got up and walked toward the restrooms. The hallway light flicked on as he turned the corner. I watched, waiting for the sound of the door opening and closing. But it never came. The hallway stayed lit. He never walked back out. After a few minutes, I walked down there myself, knocked on the men's door. No answer. I called through the crack and still nothing. That is when I buzzed Marvin, the manager, to check the security feed from his place. He called back a minute later. Said no one had gone into the hallway on the footage. Nothing. I stood outside that bathroom door with my hand on the knob. It was locked from the inside. Still, nothing moved. No sound. Just the faint hum of the light above me. I stepped back, unsettled. Then I heard it. 3 knocks, even and slow. I spun around. The sound came from behind me. Not the door. Not the wall. It was close. Way too close. I looked up at the mirror mounted in the hallway just above the paper towel dispenser. There was someone behind me. But when I turned around, no one was there. And in the mirror, I was still being watched. I ran back toward the counter, the sound of my shoes squeaking against the tile. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone when I tried to call Marvin again. The line didn't even ring this time, just static and a low hum that reminded me of someone breathing on the other end. I hung up and pressed my palms to the counter, trying to steady myself. That was when I noticed the storeroom door behind the kitchen was cracked open. I was sure I had locked it at the start of my shift. The smell that drifted out was damp and stale, like wood left underwater too long. My stomach turned. I picked up the apple knife from the prep tray. It was small, hardly a weapon, but it felt better than nothing. The light in the kitchen flickered, dimmed, then came back. I could see the old freight hatch door at the far end of the storeroom, the one that led down to the basement levels. I remembered Marvin telling me years ago that it used to connect to a refrigeration tunnel when the diner still served the train station. No one used it anymore, or at least, no one was supposed to. The hatch was open, just a few inches, but enough for a pulse of light to blink up through the gap. My first thought was that someone was down there with a flashlight. I wanted to run. I really did, but instead I found myself walking toward it, knife tight in my hand. The light snapped off. Then came the sound. 3 knocks. Close this time, almost in rhythm with my heartbeat. I froze. My breath fogged the air in front of me. Then something cold brushed against the back of my neck. I spun around, swinging the knife. The tip scraped against metal, sparking faintly. I didn't see anyone, but the air shifted. It felt like someone had just stepped out of the room. I backed up until my heels touched the hatch door. Then I heard the footsteps. Quick, panicked, running down the stairs below me. I dropped to one knee and shined my phone flashlight into the gap. The beam hit concrete. Then, old chalk drawings scattered across the floor, below rough sketches of faces, mirrors, and doorways. In one of them, I could make out my own outline drawn in white chalk, lying on the ground like a fallen shadow. I took a step back. My phone light flickered. Then he was there, right behind me. The man in the hoodie? No face beneath the hood, just darkness where his eyes should have been. He moved fast. I swung the knife, but he caught my wrist midair. His grip was ice cold. My skin burned from where he touched me. I twisted free and shoved hard, sending him staggering backward toward the stairwell. He fell. I heard each thud as his body hit the wooden steps, echoing down into the basement until it stopped somewhere deep below. I stood there, frozen, waiting for another sound. Nothing came. I ran out through the back door, the night air burning my lungs. The fog had lifted a little, the road beyond the diner faintly visible. I waved my arms at the headlights approaching from the curve. It was a police car. The officer rolled down the window, asking if I was all right. I could barely speak. When they searched the diner, there was no one in the basement. No sign of a struggle. No footprints. But the chalk drawings were still there, just like I saw them. One of the officers said they looked like old maintenance markings. I didn't argue. I quit 2 weeks later. Found work at a grocery store on the other side of town. But every night since then, I've caught myself checking the mirrors before bed. Sometimes I see a shadow behind me. Still, quiet, hooded. And when the apartment goes silent, when even the clock stops ticking for a moment, I always hear it again. 3 knocks. Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. My name is Troy McCabe. I was 32 when this happened, working solo night shifts at an old power relay station in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. There were no neighbors up there. No cell service either. Just pine trees, the dry hum of transformers, and the long stretch of high-tension lines disappearing into the mountains. I used to be a cop, but that part of my life ended fast after I vouched for the wrong person. Since then, I had taken quieter jobs, places where I could keep to myself, where nobody asked too many questions. Out here, I kept the station stable, logged equipment checks, and watched the perimeter cameras. That was the job. Halloween that year came with fog thicker than anything I had ever seen. I drove in with my brights on and still barely made out the gravel path until I was right on top of it. Everything felt muffled. The engine, the tires, even my own breath. It was like the whole mountain had wrapped itself in cotton. I had brought a big thermos of coffee and a worn-out copy of In Cold Blood to get me through the long stretch. It was supposed to be a calm night. Nobody ever came up here unless something broke. But not even half an hour in, the internal radio crackled to life. A voice whispered through, broken and grainy like it had been recorded years ago. It wasn't part of any dispatch I recognized. The words repeated once before cutting off completely. On the line, can't get down. I sat there, staring at the receiver. It didn't repeat. I checked the equipment board, ran diagnostics. Everything read normal. I tried the radio again, but the channel was dead quiet. I told myself it was just bleed through. Some weather interference or a prank. The higher the lines ran, the weirder the signals got. But then I pulled up the perimeter cameras. All feeds were clear except one, the west tree line, where the high-tension cables curved off toward the old ravine. That camera was fogged over, not just blurred, fogged like breath on a mirror. But something was visible in the static. A shape, thin, upright, perched directly on the transmission line. It looked like a man. Or maybe not. The proportions were wrong. The limbs too long. Like someone wearing clothes stretched out by time. I refreshed the feed. The image blinked. Refocused. The shape had moved. Still on the line, but closer. Always closer. Each time I looked again, it had shifted forward. Like it was crawling slowly toward the main tower, the one just outside the control station. I stepped back from the screen. The room felt colder than it had a few minutes ago. My hand reached instinctively for the loudspeaker controls. I hit the system-wide alert toggle, but instead of the siren or pre-recorded safety message, my own voice came out of the speakers. It repeated, low and distorted. Can't get down, can't get down. I didn't remember saying those words. I grabbed my flashlight and jacket, telling myself it was probably some kind of visual glitch. Cameras froze all the time in the cold, especially when the humidity was thick. Still, I had this crawling feeling behind my ribs, like something inside me already knew it was not equipment failure. I stepped outside, the door creaking against the wind, and started walking along the service road toward the first utility pole. The air was heavier than before. The fog had thickened into sheets that glowed faintly under the floodlights. Every few seconds, I could hear the faint hiss of the power lines overhead. That sound had always been comforting to me. Tonight, it was not. By the time I reached pole number 8, the one near the drop-off, I could see movement above me. The beam of my flashlight caught something clinging to the main cable. At first I thought it was debris, or maybe a torn tarp, until it turned its head toward the light. 2 reflections glinted back, sharp and metallic, like the surface of old coins catching flame. It did not sway with the wind. It held still, crouched against the line as if it were part of it. Its body was too long for a person. Thin arms folded backward in a way that made my stomach turn. I took 1 step closer, squinting through the fog. That was when it moved. Fast. It shifted along the line in a crawling motion, each limb locking into the cable like the joints of an insect. My flashlight trembled in my hand. For a second I froze completely. Then my instinct caught up, and I ran. The gravel slipped under my boots. I could hear nothing but my breath and the low hum of the transformers growing louder the closer I got to the control room. I turned once, and in the sweep of my light, it was there, not 20 meters away. Its shape blurred but gaining ground. I slammed through the door, locked it, and killed the lights. The darkness pressed close around me, thick and absolute. My pulse was so loud I thought it might give me away. I crouched behind the console, listening. Nothing. Not a sound. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then came a faint scrape above me, on the roof. Not footsteps exactly, more like wires shifting under weight. I held my breath, every muscle tense. It is the wind, I told myself. It has to be. When I finally turned the lights back on, the monitors were clear. The west camera showed nothing but fog. The radio stayed silent. Everything looked normal again. My hands shook as I poured another cup of coffee, the bitter smell grounding me, just enough to believe I had imagined it all. The night dragged on, quiet. I even started laughing under my breath, embarrassed by how easily I had lost my nerve. Around 4, I decided to check the outer circuit one last time before sunrise. The fog had thinned, the cold biting sharper now. I stepped out and looked up. The power lines stretched, clean and empty against the gray. Relief started to build in my chest, until I heard it, a faint, metallic rasp above me, like steel dragged against steel. I lifted the flashlight. It was there, perched on the next pole, its body fused to the shadow. The moment the light hit, it moved, lowering itself inch by inch along the cable until it hung directly above me. The air buzzed with static. The smell of ozone filled my mouth. It drops fast. Its arm brushes the top of my head, and I swear I feel electricity burn through my scalp. My vision flashes white. I throw myself toward the truck, slam the door, and grab the pistol from the glove box. The creature twists above the windshield, a blur of limbs and glare. I fire once into the sky. The sound tears through the valley. It screams, to a high, metallic shriek that vibrates through the chassis, and then vanishes into the fog. When the echo fades, there is only the hum of the power lines again. I sit there until dawn, watching the mist rise off the trees, waiting for something to move. Nothing does. I transferred to day shifts a week later. No one at the company believed my report, and I stopped trying to explain it. But every time fog rolls down from the ridges, and the security lights start to flicker, I catch myself staring up at the wires. The bullet I fired that night sits on my desk. A single groove runs along the metal casing, curved and narrow, like a fingernail dragged across it, one that no person could have left. My name is Mary Gilly. I was 58 when this happened. I lived alone in a cedar-sided house near the edge of Sloan Ridge, Kentucky, a patch of wooded hills so quiet. Even the dogs down the road barked only once before giving up. 2 winters had passed since my husband Roger died in that mine collapse. I had not moved a thing since. His boots still sat by the front door. The second chair at the kitchen table stayed pushed out like he might come in any minute. And every night at 9, I turned on the old tabletop radio in the living room. That had been his habit, not mine. I kept it going because silence in this house had never felt kind. My job was the overnight desk for the regional medical switchboard. Sloan Ridge did not get much traffic. Once in a while, a call would come through from an older patient with asthma or someone needing advice on what to take for a fever. Most nights were filled with the soft hiss of empty lines and the buzz of insects that somehow made it through the window screen. Halloween night. I set things up like always. Ginger tea in my old chip mug, a folded throw blanket on the sofa, and the logbook open to a fresh page. Wind rustled through the trees but never touched the house directly. The mountains here curled in around us, holding things still. At 10:14, the landline rang. Not the switchboard headset, not the call center line. My home phone. I picked it up. No one spoke. But there was breathing, slow and even, just beneath the static. I stayed on the line for a full minute, listening. It was not heavy, not frantic, just steady, like someone sleeping near your ear. The strange thing was, I knew that sound. Roger used to breathe just like that when he napped on the porch. I set the phone back in its cradle, heart tapping hard but not quite racing. I did not move for a while. I sat with both hands in my lap, watching the receiver like it might lift on its own. At 10:19, the phone rang again. Same number, same line, same breath. I pressed the call center intercom and asked if anyone had rerouted a request to me. The nurse manager sounded confused. She said no one had called in to Sloan Ridge all night. The system did not show any record of an inbound. I told her never mind. Hung up. By 10:26, I was pacing the kitchen with the cordless in one hand, trying to reason it out, trying to feel grounded in something rational. But I had worked switchboards for 13 years. I knew the way calls tracked. This one had no trail. The third time it rang. I answered before the second chime finished. And this time, someone spoke. Mary, do not lock the door tonight. 1710. That voice. That rhythm. Roger used to speak just like that when he was too tired to argue. I dropped the phone. It landed soft on the rug. Still connected. From where I stood, I could hear it breathing. Still steady. Still close. If I had not picked up that night, maybe I would not still hear that voice in my head every time the phone rings. Maybe. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone on the floor. The house felt tighter somehow, the air thick as though it had been waiting for me to move. My knees trembled. When I finally bent down and placed the receiver back in its cradle, I realized I was shaking so badly that the cord rattled against the wall. I locked the front door, then the back, then every window latch I could find. The flashlight from the closet felt heavy in my hands. its beam cutting thin paths through the shadows. The only sound was the clock above the stove ticking, slow and steady, just a half beat off from my pulse. I told myself it was nothing. A prank, maybe, or an echo from the switchboard lines. Then came the knock. 3 slow raps against the front door, not loud, but heavy enough to vibrate through the frame. I froze halfway to the phone. The porch light was still off, and through the curtain I could see only the faint reflection of my own face in the window glass. I called the local sheriff's number. The line filled with static before the first ring, so thick it drowned out my voice. The connection crackled, then dropped completely. When I tried again, all I heard was a faint whispering on the other end, too low to make out. The kitchen lights began to flicker. I sat down in the chair nearest the hallway, the flashlight across my knees like a weapon. I remember whispering Roger's name without meaning to, half hoping his voice might answer again. The phone rang once more, the sound sharp in the dark. I didn't pick it up, but the line was open already, and from the receiver came that same breath, followed by the voice I loved more than any other. "I'm home. Mary. Open the door." Dressy. Something inside me broke at the sound. It wasn't just fear. It was longing. I wanted so badly for it to be true that for a moment, I believed it. I even reached for the door handle before my mind caught up with my body. I took one step back and grabbed the flashlight. No footsteps outside. No movement. Just fog rolling through the yard like smoke. I edged toward the kitchen window and pulled the curtain aside with the light in my hand. A man stood in the yard, facing away from the house. He was still, completely still. The same height, the same build as Roger. He wore a miner's cap pulled low. My chest seized up, breath caught between disbelief and grief. "Who are you?" I shouted. "If you come any closer, I'll shoot." He didn't move. I flicked the switch for the porch light. The bulb hummed, then flared to life. He turned his head. There was no face. Just skin, smooth and blank, stretching over where the eyes and mouth should have been. The cap sat perfectly in place on top, and yet there was nothing beneath it but that pale emptiness. I stumbled backward, the flashlight slipping from my grip. It hit the floor with a crack and rolled away, the beam spinning across the walls. For a heartbeat, I saw the doorway behind me shift, and then the back door burst open with a single crash. I spun around, lifted the flashlight, and swung as hard as I could. The beam hit nothing but air. A cold pressure moved past me, brushing my shoulder like a breath. The smell of damp earth filled the room, and then it was gone. Just gone. When the police arrived at dawn, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the flashlight still in my lap. They searched the yard, the doors, the windows. No footprints. No sign of anyone breaking in. They said I must have dreamed it, that exhaustion and grief can do strange things to a mind. I didn't argue. I just nodded, signed the report, and told them I'd be switching to day shifts. That part was true. But what I didn't tell them was this. Every night since, at 10:14, the landline rings once. Only once. I never answer it anymore. Still, sometimes when I pass the hallway, I can hear that faint breath through the receiver, slow and steady, like someone waiting on the other end. And no matter where I am in the house, that sound always seems to come from behind me. My name is Sam Taylor. I was 19 last year when this happened, back home in Boone County, North Carolina. Me and my best friend Reese volunteered for a Halloween night patrol through the National Forest as part of a community program called Roving Watch. The job was simple: walk the trails, check for hikers who got turned around, radio back anything unusual. Reese thought it was hilarious that we got assigned to Deep Hollow, a stretch of forest most folks in town avoided. He said it would make a great video for his channel, a nothing spooky ever happens kind of post. I told him the area was rough and off the regular map, but he had already strapped his GoPro to his chest and grinned like it was a camping trip. Deep Hollow was different from the rest of the forest. The trees grew too close together, and the path narrowed into uneven steps carved from stone. Somewhere along that ridge line, there was a gap people called Old Reed's Gap, the one no map ever marked. The locals like to say the air went strange there, like radio static. I grew up hearing those stories around bonfires. They always ended the same way. If the trail feels longer coming back, don't look over your shoulder. I never thought much of it. Until that night. We parked at the ranger lot around 8, hiked 2 miles in under fog that rolled between the pines. The air smelled metallic, and our flashlights bounced off the mist like it had weight. My phone lost service halfway up the ridge, and Reese laughed when his did the same. "Guess we're off the grid now," he said, raising the camera like it was proof of courage. Around 10, the radio started to crackle, just static at first. Then, beneath it, a voice. Female. The words were faint, distorted, but clear enough that both of us stopped walking. "Do not turn left at the 8th step. Do not turn left." Reese snorted. Someone's playing around. Probably a ranger prank. But when I checked the device, the signal came from our local channel. Internal frequency. There was no one else out there. We kept walking, slower now. The trail split at a small clearing marked by a moss-covered stone post. I counted 7 steps down. The 8th led to a turn where the path curved left toward a shadowed slope. The sound of the wind changed there, softer, almost like a breath drawn in. That was when we saw it. A cabin stood just beyond the bend, half hidden by trees. Its roof sagged under moss, its windows pale with grime, but the front door hung open by an inch. I looked down at the printed topographic map we carried. The spot where we stood was blank. Nothing marked. No structure. No ruins. Reese grinned, the GoPro light blinking red. "Bonus footage," he said. "Come on, man. Just a peek. Things bei faction intation. With we have to averrated." I didn't answer. The air felt too heavy, like rain was about to start, though the sky was dry. Still, I followed him, because that's what friends do when one of them laughs at fear. The cabin's door creaked as Reese pushed it open. Inside, the air was cold and clean, not dusty like I expected. No cobwebs, no footprints, like someone had just left a moment ago. I swung my flashlight toward the far wall, and the beam caught something framed in the center. A photograph. It was us. Me and Reese, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of that very same wall. Only the picture looked old, the paper yellowed, our clothes from another time entirely. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The flashlight trembled slightly in my hand, its beam shaking across the photo frame. Reese leaned closer, squinting, then let out a low whistle. "Man, that's creepy," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't sound real. I wanted to tell him to leave it alone, but before I could speak, the light in my hand flickered and went out. The cabin went completely dark. Reese muttered something under his breath, tapping at his GoPro, but its red recording light had died too. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pressed in, thick and damp, as if the air had turned into water around us. I could hear a faint creaking above, the sound of floorboards shifting even though the cabin had no second floor. That was when I felt it, a tremor under my boots, small but distinct, like someone had stepped onto the porch outside. I whispered Reese's name. No answer. I turned toward where I thought he stood, and in that instant, I saw a faint white shape at the top of the far wall, something long and pale, like a handprint pressed into the wood. We ran. I didn't even remember deciding to. My shoulder hit the doorframe as I bolted out, Reese right behind me. The cold air outside felt like breaking through ice. We didn't stop until the trees thinned enough for our flashlights to blink back on. When we looked behind us, the cabin was gone. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but there was nothing. Just a patch of scorched grass in the shape of a square, blackened and dry. Reese bent over, hands on his knees, laughing too hard, the kind of laugh that breaks apart at the edges. "Dude, it was there, right?" he asked. "You saw it too." I nodded. That was all I could do. The radio came back to life with a burst of static. I could hear the dispatch voice faintly asking for coordinates. Her tone sharp, professional. We both started talking at once, trying to describe what happened, where we were. The connection kept cutting in and out, but I managed to hear my name once before it faded again. That was when Reese looked past me, toward the ridgeline. His face changed. I turned to see what he was staring at. He was there. Or maybe it was someone else. A figure standing right where the cabin should have been, half hidden by fog. It didn't move. It didn't have any color. Just a shape, like a person drawn out of shadow. Then the forest went quiet. Even the wind stopped. I blinked, and the shape was gone. We decided to head back. The path looked the same, but the steps felt steeper, uneven. I counted without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. When I reached the 8th, Reese's light drifted out of sight ahead of me. "Reese," I called. No answer. I walked faster, and then I heard him. He was standing at the base of a stone marker, whispering to himself. "I didn't count the steps," he said. I turned left. His voice was flat, dazed, like he was trying to remember something important that kept slipping away. "Reese, we need to move," I told him, grabbing his sleeve. His skin felt cold through the fabric. I pulled, but he didn't move. That was when I heard her voice again. The same soft, static-coated whisper that had come through the radio hours ago. The 8th step. I dragged him, half carrying him back toward the trailhead. The trees blurred. The lights came back on near the service road, the radio buzzing with overlapping chatter. I remember dropping down on the gravel beside the truck, gasping for air. Reese stared blankly ahead, eyes glassy. When we got back to town, he said he didn't remember any of it. He swore there was no cabin, no voice, no photograph. Every time I brought it up, he shut down, anger flashing across his face before he changed the subject. I still have that old printed map folded in my glove compartment. It's faded now, the edges curled from moisture, but I look at it sometimes when I can't sleep. A faint brown line of handwriting runs along the bottom margin, one that wasn't there before that night. Turn back before it knows your name. That one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. Now, story 6. I told myself I was doing penance that night. I was 29 and working the overnight shift at the Evidence Processing Center in Gallup, New Mexico, the kind of place where clocks sound louder than people. After the incident that moved me off patrol, I had taken this job to keep my head down and my hands busy. It was quiet work most nights, logging seals, checking tags, and watching the corridor cameras for bored raccoons. My name was Carlos Vega. I had been a reserve officer for years before a misstep in a high-pressure interview cost me my badge. That was the truth I did not bring up at holiday gatherings. The evidence room kept me safe in a way. Small tasks and routine that did not ask for explanations or forgiveness. Halloween felt emptier than usual. The radios in town cheered and clattered with parties, but the processing center was a box of fluorescent light and humming refrigerators. I arrived with a thermos and a podcast, cued that I never let play past the first segment. I liked listening to other people's crimes while I handled the proof of them. Ironic therapy that kept my own mistakes at bay. Around 11:40, the printer beside the review terminal kicked over a sheet that I did not expect. The heading read Case 04111 in a font my system had never used before. I frowned and ran the number through the database. The case did not exist. The corridor lights in Section B started to flicker. At first, I blamed the old wiring that everyone complained about during inspections. But then the security feed on the monitor showed a door open that should not have been. Exhibit room 2 was bright when it should have been dark. The camera angle made the space look too white, like a photograph overexposed. I walked toward the door with my badge clipped to my shirt and the small flashlight that made me feel official. The metal frame was cold under my palm. Inside, the table held a ripped evidence bag with a blood-stained military jacket folded beside it. The tag on the jacket said removed from scene 04111 and bore a warning not to unseal it. A sound clicked behind me, like a latch settling. I turned fast and saw the corridor door had locked itself. The lock was in the engaged position and there was no one in the hallway. My throat tightened. I lifted my radio and spoke. Testing channels. There was only static and a faint loop of my own voice saying a phrase I had once used in court. I stepped back into the doorway and called out. No answer came. The jacket sat as if waiting for me to lift it up and make sense of the stain. I had handled worse than that jacket, but there was a different weight to it, the kind that sinks down into your bones. The flicker in the lights made the blood look like a dark map. I tried the office line and got nothing but a hiss. The internal announcement system suddenly played a snippet of me from an old interrogation clip. My voice echoed the line I had sworn about in anger once. The memory of that night folding in on itself. I had not expected to hear my own words stitched back to me from these walls. I remember thinking then that I should call someone, anyone, to prove I was not losing my mind. I radioed the front desk and the reply was slow, uncertain, then blank. The center belonged to other people during the day and to ghosts of paperwork at night. I felt eyes where there should be none. The door to exhibit room 2 stood open, a slice of bright inside a darker corridor. I stepped forward, the floor under me echoing with each footfall. The jacket lay there like a question I did not want to answer. My hand hovered over the table, unsure whether I was reaching for evidence or for an old sin. I didn't touch the jacket. I knew better. Protocol was clear. Even in a moment like that, if a bag was ripped, you logged it, reported it, and waited. But something about that room made waiting feel dangerous. I backed away toward the door, radio still crackling with static. That was when the lights dimmed again, not flickering this time, but holding low, like someone was adjusting a dimmer from somewhere unseen. A cold pressure slid along the base of my spine. The intercom above me clicked once, and my own voice came through again. I didn't shoot I just reacted. I had said those words during the post-incident review. Not proudly, not confidently, just like that, flat, automatic. I turned sharply toward the far corner of the room. There was someone there. A shape, a man, maybe, standing in the shadow just outside the cone of light. He wore a military jacket, the same kind folded on the table, and his face was hidden by the glare above. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood. I raised my voice. Who's in here? Identify yourself. And Section to the 7. They would have now over said. Still nothing. I stepped back, heart pounding now. My hand went to my belt, to the small collapsible baton we carried in place of full weapons. I drew it out and clicked it open. My fingers were slick with sweat. Security, I said again. I have the right to detain you. This is a restricted facility. Endeavory thrashed, insisted. Then he lunged. He moved fast, the chair between us toppling as I shoved it forward, slamming it into his legs. I brought the baton down on his shoulder. Hard. There was a thud, but no grunt, no wince. He didn't react like any person should have. He grabbed my collar and slammed me against the wall. I felt my shoulder crack as pain exploded through my chest. I fought back, swinging, kicking, anything I could manage. He shoved me toward the table, but I caught the edge and used it to pivot away. I made it to the door and yanked at the release. Locked. I turned, bracing as he charged again. At the last second, I ducked and kicked low, sending him stumbling back. The sound of his body hitting the cabinet was loud. Metal against metal. I saw him reel, I slammed the baton across his hand and drove my elbow into the side of his head. Still, no sound from him. I flung the door open and ran. He followed. His steps were heavy, thudding against the tile floor behind me. I did not dare look back. I sprinted through the corridor, past shelves of old evidence crates, toward the emergency exit. He was gaining. At the final door, I turned and slammed it shut just as he reached it. His arm shot through the gap. I grabbed it with both hands, wedged the metal baton between the doorframe and his forearm, and slammed the door again. I heard something snap. He recoiled. I pushed the door shut with all my weight, locked it. Then I fell to the ground outside, half on the loading dock, gasping. I had hit the stone wall near the back ramp hard enough to bruise my ribs, but I didn't care. I just wanted out of that building. It took nearly 30 minutes before the first morning shift guard arrived. He found me sitting against the loading dock rail, shoulder dislocated, breathing shallow. 2 months of medical leave followed. Torn ligament, nerve damage. They told me stress was making me see things, maybe even hallucinate. But when they reviewed the footage from that night, all they found was me, alone, running, fighting, swinging my baton at empty air. The jacket from room 2, gone. No bag, no blood, nothing in the log. The only thing left was a single frame on camera 21. Me, leaning over the table, staring at something that wasn't there. Halloween night settled over Jennings Hollow like an old quilt soaked in diesel and wood smoke. The air smelled like scorched leaves and pumpkin guts, thick and wet. And the only sounds were the dry rustle of cornfields and the occasional firecracker going off 2 streets over. Out on Route 78, the world felt stretched thin, quiet enough to hear the buzz of the power lines overhead, but tense, like the town was holding its breath. My name's Riley Madsen. I was 22 then, and I'd been doing the night shift at Baxter's Gas and Go for about 7 months. Nobody takes the Halloween shift unless they really need the money, and I needed it bad. Tuition had come due, and I was already on the wrong side of grace with my student loan rep. The place was barely more than a booth and 2 rows of pumps. On good nights, you might get a trucker stopping for a Red Bull, or some teens rolling through blasting horrorcore with fake blood on their faces. That night, around 10:30, I'd sold a 6-pack to a guy in a scarecrow mask and a box of Swishers to 2 girls dressed as cheerleaders with zombie makeup. It was close to 11 when the white SUV pulled in. Big thing, maybe a Lincoln or a Tahoe. Rolled up real slow, to pump number 3. Engine still running. Headlights burning a hole through the fog that had started curling in from the soybean fields. But nobody got out. I gave it a minute. Sometimes folks don't want help, just need a second to dig through their glove box or check their phone. I flipped through a crossword behind the counter, glanced up. The SUV still sat there, humming softly, like it was waiting. After 2 minutes, I tapped the mic on the intercom. My voice cracked through the outdoor speaker. I said, "Evening. Y'all need any help out there?" Nothing. Not a flinch from inside the cab. Then the motion sensor light clicked on. It was the one in the far corner of the lot, near the edge of the dumpster enclosure. It only ever lit up when someone walked past, usually a cat or a drunk wandering over from Clyde's bar. But tonight, it felt different, too precise, like it had been triggered on purpose. I leaned forward toward the monitors. The grainy black and white feed from camera 4 showed a sliver of movement, just out of frame. Nothing clear, just a flicker, like something passed through the beam of the light and kept going. You ever see a car running, lights on, engine purring, but nobody inside? That does something to your stomach. Now pair that with motion lights turning on, one by one, like someone's walking a circle around you, but you can't see them. That's when you start to feel the rules break a little. Back in the booth, I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe the driver stepped out to take a leak behind the bushes. Maybe the angle just kept them hidden. Still, I reached under the counter and unhooked the mini flashlight taped to the shelf. Just in case. I stepped outside. The air was colder than before. The wind had picked up, carrying the distant sound of a party down the highway. Whooping, car horns, someone yelling, "Trick or treat," through a megaphone. I walked over to the SUV slowly, trying not to startle anyone. My boots crunched over grit and old leaves. I reached the driver's side window and peeked in. Nobody. Not in the front seat. Not in the back. Just the engine idling. Steady and low. A half-empty soda bottle in the cup holder. A hoodie crumpled on the passenger side. And taped to the inside of the windshield, just above the steering wheel, was a scrap of notebook paper. The handwriting looked rushed, maybe scratched with the tip of a pen, running out of ink. It said, "This car doesn't belong to him." I gasped. My skin went cold. I backed away, heart kicking harder than it should. The engine kept humming, like the car didn't notice I'd read its secret. I turned and started back toward the booth, reached for the door, yanked it open, and dove inside. Locked it behind me. My fingers found the phone under the counter and I punched in 911. But before it even rang, I caught something else on the screen. The camera feed was frozen. Timestamp, 10:58 p.m. Same minute I'd stepped out. It had cut out exactly as I left the booth. Every single camera, all gray. And then the chime rang. Not the front door. The back one. The one we always kept locked. The one that had no reason to open. The back door chimed again. Softer this time. Like the sound had moved away instead of closer. I stared at the monitor even though I knew it was still frozen. The silence in the booth was sharp, pressing on my ears. Somewhere behind me, the hum of the refrigerator kicked on, and that tiny sound felt almost alive. I forced myself to move. I grabbed the flashlight and crept toward the hallway that led to the back door. My own reflection in the glass door startled me when I passed it. For a second I thought someone was on the other side, watching me from the dark lot. The lock was still in place. I jiggled it, checked the frame, even pressed against the metal to make sure it held. Everything looked untouched. I whispered out loud just to hear my own voice. Nobody's here. That small sound barely filled the space. Back at the counter, I switched the monitor feed and waited. The static lines flickered. Then one camera blinked back to life. The pumps came into view again. The white SUV was gone. No taillights. No sound. Just empty pavement reflecting the light. For a few seconds, that felt like safety. I took a deep breath and told myself it had to be a prank. Maybe those college kids from earlier had looped around to mess with me. Halloween night in Jennings Hollow had a way of making simple things feel cursed. I sat down behind the counter and opened a soda from the fridge. The can hissed and my hands were shaking so bad I nearly spilled it. Outside, the fog was moving across the parking lot again, thick and slow. I stared into it, half expecting that SUV to roll back in. Then I noticed something strange. The timestamp on the feed was running again, but the image had a jump, like a skipped heartbeat. I scrolled back a few minutes on the playback. Static flared, then cleared. For a moment I saw it. A shadow of a man walking around the edge of the lot. Not in focus. Never close enough to see a face. Just a movement reflected across the gas station's glass panels, passing between light and dark. I leaned forward until my forehead almost touched the screen. The motion sensor light turned on again. The beam flared bright against the fog. My pulse kicked up, and I turned slowly toward the front window. I could see nothing at first, just my own shape, mirrored back at me in the glass. Then the reflection shifted. Someone was standing outside the door. He was close. His face pressed almost flat against the glass. I saw the blur of breath, the pale smear of skin, eyes that didn't blink. I had not heard any footsteps. No gravel, no door chime. He was simply there. I shouted, dropped the soda, and ran toward the back hall. My flashlight beam bounced over the walls. When I burst through the storage room, the back lot was empty again. The air was still, heavy with gasoline and night. The man was gone. The police came about 20 minutes later. 2 cars, lights flashing red against the fog. They walked the lot, asked questions, wrote notes. They found no SUV, no footprints, nothing but tire dust and a single soda can half crushed under the counter. They checked the cameras. One of the officers frowned and said the feed was corrupted. No playback data past 11 o'clock. I showed them where I had seen the recording, but it was gone. Just black screen, frozen numbers. When they finally told me to go home, the sky was turning gray over the cornfields. I felt drained, hollowed out. I locked the booth one last time and walked to my car. The morning air smelled like damp soil and metal. Then I saw it. A small folded paper tucked under my windshield wiper. The handwriting was the same scratchy lines pressed into the page as if written in a hurry. Your turn now. Take you one. I stood there with my breath fogging the glass. The parking lot completely still. For a long moment, the world felt balanced on the edge of a whisper, like the sound of an engine that had just been turned off. Halloween night had a strange stillness to it that year. Most houses were dark by the time I pulled out of the depot, and the few porch lights left on were swallowed up by fog rolling down from the hills outside Johnson City. Even the usual scatter of fireworks was missing. Just silence, low clouds, and the buzz of my truck's tired engine. I'm Owen Kessler, 38, and I work the night delivery shift for USPS. It's not glamorous. It's not safe either, but the insurance covers my daughter's therapy after her last surgery. That was reason enough to keep the wheels turning. That night, my scanner flagged 6 redelivery stops, all labeled as routing errors. Not unusual. Packages bounce back sometimes if a code gets scanned wrong. But one of the addresses caught my eye. Maple Ridge Lane. That neighborhood had been pulled off the route months ago. I remembered the note in the system: low occupancy, non-standard access, subject to future removal. It was the kind of place you left off the map unless someone really insisted. But now the GPS said it was active again. Not rerouted. Not optional. Just back. I didn't question it. Maybe someone moved back in. Maybe they fixed the streetlights and patched the road. I threw the 6 packages in the back, filled my thermos, and took off like I always did. Routine is a powerful thing. The music on my phone kept skipping from signal loss, so I turned it off and drove in silence, past old billboards, half-lit intersections, and trailer lots where carved pumpkins sat in the dark, sagging and soft. I didn't see a single trick-or-treater, just a lot of shadows pretending to be trees. Maple Ridge turned off from the main road with no sign. The gravel crunched under my tires, and my headlights caught a flicker of something reflective in the ditch. Rows of mailboxes leaned sideways like gravestones. The houses came into view one after another, windows blank, yards overgrown. Most of the streetlights were dead. One buzzed faintly near the middle of the block, casting a cone of yellow that barely reached the sidewalk. My scanner beeped, and I slowed to a stop in front of number 117. It looked like the others, maybe a little more intact. There was a dim porch light on at the back. I grabbed the package and stepped out. My boots sank slightly in the wet leaves. The house didn't make a sound. I knocked twice. Waited. No answer. As I turned to set the box on the threshold, the door creaked open. I hadn't heard a latch or a lock. It just eased back, like someone had nudged it from the other side. But nobody stood there, just darkness stretching into the house. I called out a quiet, "Hello," just in case. Nothing answered. No radio. No footsteps. I put the box down and stepped back, not willing to cross the line into someone's house without permission, even if the door was begging me to. That's when I heard it. A light tap behind me, like plastic hitting wood. Not footsteps. Not the thud of a branch or an animal. Just a single, hollow clack. I spun around fast, heart already starting to rise in my throat. The yard was empty. My truck sat under the last working street light. The fog was getting thicker. I scanned the nearby houses. Most were dark, but in the corner windows of two, I saw movement. Not full figures, just shapes, shadows. The kind that suggests someone standing behind a curtain, watching. I took a step back toward the truck, keeping my eyes on the windows. Whatever curiosity I had left died the moment I saw that none of the figures had faces. Just blank spaces. No shine of eyes. No tilt of a head. Nothing human in how they stood. I turned and walked briskly toward the truck, key already in hand. I did not run. Something about the quiet made it feel like running would trigger something worse. Just a few more steps, and I would be out of there. But when I reached the driver's side, the door was cracked open. Not wide, just enough to feel wrong. The dome light was on, casting a sickly glow over the seats. My GPS screen was black, and my phone resting in the holder had no signal bar. I climbed in fast and slammed the door shut. Turned the key. The engine clicked. Then nothing. I tried again, harder. Still dead. In the rearview mirror, movement. 3 figures stepped out from the fog behind the truck. All of them wore the same mask. White, featureless, like a child's paper cutout. Each carried a long plastic tube, almost the length of a broomstick. They moved without urgency. No shouting. No sound at all. I opened the door and ran. The ground was slick from the damp leaves. My boots lost grip near the sidewalk, and I slipped hard, hitting my elbow. As I scrambled up, I felt a rush of air near my foot, like one of them had swung just inches too wide. I vaulted over a rotting fence into someone's yard, not thinking, just running. The grass was overgrown and cold against my legs. I pushed past a shed, found a narrow gate, and cut across another yard. The houses were still dead silent. No porch lights. No help. My lungs burned. But I kept going. A wooden structure appeared ahead. An old storage shed or detached garage. I darted inside and slammed the door behind me. It held. For now. Inside, it was almost pitch black. Dust in the air. The smell of rust and old gasoline. I grabbed the nearest object, a metal rod, maybe a pipe or a broken chair leg. Anything I could lift and swing. I backed into the corner, forcing my breath to quiet. Then the door creaked. It opened slow, deliberate. One of them steps inside. I raise the rod and hurl it. It connects with something. A grunt. I throw the next object I can grab, a box of tools, and dash for the back. I crash through thin plywood and out the other side. I do not look back. I sprint down the narrow path between 2 houses, and when I reach the corner, I stop cold. One of them is already there. He stands just at the edge of the street, flashlight in hand, pointing it directly at my chest. He does not chase. He just stands still as the beam flickers in the fog. Then he takes one step back, another, and fades into the dark like smoke. Headlights. A horn. A long-haul truck rolls up the main road, and I stumble into its lane waving both arms. The driver hits the brakes, curses, and pulls over. I do not remember what I said, just that he believed me enough to let me climb in and lock the door. I never went back to that route. I filed a transfer the same week and left the night shift for good. But a few days later, as I pulled out my old jacket from the laundry basket, I felt something in the pocket. It was a small package. No label. No address. Just one line in shaky handwriting on the taped seal. Return to the one who survived. I'm really glad you've stayed with me this far. Before we move on to the next story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss any of our new videos every single day. Now then, let's continue. Halloween nights in Bluefield always had a low hum to them. Not the kind you hear, but the kind you feel. The way air settles too still, or how shadows seem to lean the wrong way. Most folks in town were either handing out candy or shutting their blinds early. I was tucked inside a dim office above Main, watching digital cars blink on a screen. My name's Noah Pierce. I was 26 then, working the night shift as a dispatch coordinator for a taxi service called Echo Line. Small operation. Just 8 cars. Most of them dented and old. But we ran steady through the valley and into the edge of the ridge towns. Halloween brought in the prank calls and ghost stories. But I knew better than to flinch at weird names or fake pickup spots. That night, around 11:30, a ride request popped up on my terminal. Pickup, Holt Junction. Drop off, 325 Granger Way. No phone number, no client name. And the oddest thing, the estimated time of arrival had already passed by 17 minutes. I figured it was a glitch, maybe a lagged request or a corrupted GPS tag. But then I saw it had already been accepted by car 17. That didn't make sense. Driver of car 17 had been out sick for 3 days. The keys were still logged in at the depot. I blinked at the screen, checked the logs again. Car 17 showed as active, not just online, but moving, slowly, following the route as if someone were really driving it. But there was no sound input from the onboard mic, no signal from the ignition system. I picked up the headset and dialed the number tied to the unit, just in case. It rang, then dropped. No voicemail, no automated reply, just silence. I tried twice more before checking the map again. The car was now a block from its destination. I opened the client record. Nothing there. Not even a trace of who requested the ride. Just a blank field and a timestamp that kept updating. I started to feel cold. My eyes scanned back to the drop-off. 325 Granger Way was not a real address. It sat at the far edge of the city limits, up past the ridgeline near the old quarry. I had been out there once on a late pickup. All I remembered was chain-link fences and dirt lots. I clicked on the system's internal messenger and opened the message log for car 17. That is when the messages started arriving. Client requests no conversation. They was, also, arrived at drop-off. Back to dapt as in the passive hentus. Client has not exited the vehicle. Takes for morgetted, and quote, expecting. Each message came in clean, like a real-time update. But there was no one to send them. I tried deleting the ride. The system froze. Tried canceling the car assignment. Nothing worked. The terminal beeped and returned to the ride screen. Car 17 just sat there, waiting. Imagine watching a car drive itself across a dead map. No driver. No passenger. Yet the system insists it is working fine. Messages appear like someone is talking to you from inside the ride. Only they never breathe. Never pause. Never make a mistake. Like they are pretending to be human. I stared at the screen too long. My reflection started to look wrong in the glass. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. I thought about pulling the plug on the terminal, but something about the way it kept updating made me feel watched. I opened the event log. It listed every interaction for that car over the last year. My stomach dropped. The same ride had appeared before. Same pickup point. Same drop-off. Same night. 1 year ago. And the request had been submitted by a name I recognized. Noah Pierce. Me. My throat went dry as I stared at the name. There was no mistaking it. Same spelling. Same login ID. Same dispatch account. The system showed I had ordered the ride. Exactly 1 year ago. Down to the minute. I backed away from the desk like it might catch fire. The monitors flickered. Fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, then dimmed for half a second. When they came back, the printer in the corner whirred to life. A single slip of paper rolled out. No sound but the faint grind of plastic gears. I stepped over to it and read the words printed in clean. Black ink. Pickup, Noah P. Drop-off 325 Granger Way. 11:47 p.m. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my jeans and tried to make sense of it. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe a data glitch was pulling old entries. I opened the map again. Car 17 was gone. The icon had vanished. No route. No logs. The whole ride had disappeared from the screen like it had never existed. I stood there for a full minute, not sure whether I felt relief or something worse. I left the office. I did not clock out. I just walked down the stairwell, pushed open the side door, and crossed the lot to my car. The night air felt strange, like it was listening. I remember looking up and seeing that none of the streetlights were on. At home, I told myself it had to be a file ghost. Corrupted memory. Something caught in the archive from the year before. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. At 3:17 in the morning, my laptop pinged. It was an auto notification from the Echo line system. The subject line was blank. The body of the message held just one line. Client has not exited the vehicle. Dane Daming. Attached was a single image. I clicked it. It opened slowly, line by line, like old dial-up. It showed the backseat of a taxi, my body, slumped, eyes open, staring at nothing. I slammed the laptop shut, sat frozen in my chair. I quit the next morning, told them I could not work with the systems anymore, that it was stress, that I needed time off. But I never got back in a taxi again. And every year, without fail, on Halloween night at exactly 11:47, that same email shows up. The ride is on its way. Wait, Elkins always felt a little too quiet on Halloween. The wind ran cold off the hills, carrying the smell of burnt pumpkins and wood smoke. And most houses locked up early. Even the kids seemed quieter last year, like the whole town was leaning into the hush. I remember the trees lining Davis Street barely moved, but the porch lights flickered anyway, like something just out of view was breathing on the wires. I'm Lexi Tran, 24, Vietnamese, American, born in Philly, but I've been in West Virginia since high school. I do nails, freelance. Mostly, cheap rentals and quiet nights made Elkins a decent place to build a portfolio while I worked toward my license at the Beauty Academy. That night, I took a last-minute gig, double pay. A woman booked me through an app I use for private appointments. She wanted a full set, custom design, traditional style, but the only condition was that I had to come at midnight. No name, just an address about 4 miles out of town. A Victorian house tucked into the base of the forest ridge, where the gravel road cuts off and the mailboxes get crooked. The kind of place that didn't show up unless you zoomed way in on the map. I needed the money. Tuition was due, and my kits were getting worn. I packed everything fresh and left around 11:15. The drive was all twists and dips, past old silos and barns that leaned like they were eavesdropping. I arrived at 11:45. The front door was already open, not wide but enough to see the yellow glow of lamplight inside. No porch light, no motion, just that faint amber haze spilling onto the steps like it had been waiting. She was already seated when I stepped in. Black hair, long and loose. A white nightgown, soft cotton. She didn't greet me, didn't move, just held one hand up toward me as I walked closer, her eyes still fixed somewhere past my shoulder. Her voice came quiet, thin. Do it like the picture I sent. Every line exact. Is a Keyser. I nodded, trying not to stare too long. Her skin looked powdered, almost pale enough to glow. I set my kit down and unpacked the bottles. The design she wanted was strange. A red base, but at the center of each nail, a white circle with a black pupil. Like an eye. My chest tightened when I saw it again on my phone. It reminded me of something my grandmother used to paint on the doorframe in our old apartment. Warding eyes, meant to keep spirits out. I asked if she was sure about the color, and she didn't answer. I started working. Her fingers were colder than I expected, but steady, completely still. No twitch, no pull, like she had done this 1,000 times. 3 nails in, and she spoke again. Do not look into the mirror. Today in... I paused, glanced around. There was a mirror above the fireplace. framed in old carved wood. I hadn't noticed it until then. It was fogged over, even though there was no heat. I told myself maybe it was a draft, maybe her breath, but she wasn't facing it. Then I saw it. On the surface of the mirror, 5 red shapes appeared like fingerprints, but they were too long, too curved, like nail marks dragged across glass from the inside. I looked down at her hand. I had only done 3. Something about the angle, the spacing. It was not a reflection of us. It was something else entirely. I kept my eyes on her hands and told myself to focus. Just finish the set and get paid. But my skin prickled every time I glanced near that mirror. The fog on the glass did not fade. I said I needed to grab a topcoat from the car. She said nothing, just lowered her hand and sat back like she had been placed there by someone else. I stepped out onto the porch and took one breath of the night air. Cold, too still. When I turned back to the house, the light was gone. All of it. Not just the room. The entire place had gone dark, as if no one had lived there in years. I stared through the glass, saw nothing but shadow. At the car, I opened my case to double-check my kit. That was when I saw them. 10 silicone practice hands, lined up neatly in the back tray. Every nail painted in the same red and white design I had just started. I never kept those hands finished. Never in uniform. I stood there longer than I should have. My hands shook as I closed the box. I was not sure what scared me more. The idea that someone had painted them while I was inside, or the thought that maybe I had and did not remember. I went back to the house. The front door eased open before I touched it. No light, no footsteps, no voice calling me in. The room smelled different now, less like oil and powder, more like wet fabric and cold stone. The chair was empty. The woman was gone. But the nail work was complete. All 10 fingers laid across a white cloth on the table, glossy and perfect, down to the tiniest brushstroke. I knew I had not finished them. One of the wall mirrors had cracked. A thin fracture down the center split the frame like a wound. Behind the broken glass, there was something else. A narrow opening, almost hidden, a stairwell leading downward, into the dark. Then I heard it. Laughter. Soft, high, like a child playing hide and seek. It echoed faintly, not from the room but from inside the mirror itself. I crouched near the crack, heart thudding against my ribs. I leaned closer to the reflection, and I saw a face. Not hers, not mine. Pale, rounded, without eyes. Just smooth skin where they should have been. Its mouth was open like it was still laughing. I turned fast, expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the room was empty. I ran, tripped over the threshold, and hit the porch hard, scraping my knees. When I lifted my head, she was there, standing beside me. Her white nightgown did not rustle. Her smile was gentle, almost kind. Beautiful nails, she whispered. Now they are enough to hold the spirit in. There's never within diff, cameway. I am both. I do not remember how I got into my car. I do not remember the road home. Only the lights of Elkins coming into view and the feel of dried polish still clinging to my hands. After that night, I stopped using that pattern. I told clients it was unavailable. Some designs are not just for looks. But 6 months later, something started happening. Whenever a client picked red, even a plain shade, my own nails would bleed at the edges. Not much, just a slow, stinging line along the cuticle, as if something were pressing out from underneath. She never left a review. Only one message came through the booking site. I will schedule again. Was that it's not? Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.